Appeals and Equalization to order. We have only one item on our agenda, and that's the minutes from our June 21st, 2022 meeting. So what's the wishes of the board on the minutes?
They looked accurate to me. I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Ward, second by Commissioner Meyer to approve the minutes from June 21st, 2022 Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And that is concludes the business for the Board of Appeal and Equalization. So
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Kvesi to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Individuals have up to 2 minutes to share their views with us. So if you are here in the audience and you would like to make a public comment to the board, could you please step forward to the mic? State your name and address.
Sarah Miles, 27561 Rolling Hills Road, Lewiston. I'm here because I applied for an ARP grant for a incubator kitchen. I don't know if the protocol allows for it, but I'm here to answer questions if you have any for me. That's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment during our public comment period? Please tell us your name and address and go ahead.
David Bear, 45 South Benson Drive, Lewiston. I am the chairman of the Winona County Republican Party. I sent emails to all of you, plus Sandra Sukla, regarding the ballot board, and I included a list of names that are vetted members of the Republican Party to be included on that ballot board. I know that's going to be discussed and voted on tonight. I just wanted to make sure you had a list of people that we had that volunteered for it. And I'd be happy to answer questions about that.
Please state your name and address and tell us what you need to say.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Amanda Headland with Habitat for Humanity. My home address is 263 West 5th Street. And you know that we have an item for consideration this evening. Outside of that, I just wanted to commend and thank the county for sharing its resources with the community for betterment with whichever way you decide. I think that was a noble and a kind decision. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in the audience that would like to make a public comment? And if there's anyone attending the meeting via Ring Central on the internet and you would like to make a comment, please unmute yourself and get our attention.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please tell us your name and address and proceed.
Okay. Hello, my name is Ann Olson. I'm with a group called Animal Folks. Address 1041 Grand Avenue, St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm here, I've spoken in the past. I'm here to talk about puppy mills, the puppy mill issue. As you know, these are large-scale dog breeding facilities that confine adult dogs for the mass production of puppies that are then sold and shipped to pet stores throughout the United States. We did submit to the chair over 360 petitions from residents in Winona County. Some of these names you commissioners have received before, but we wanted to submit a full list. Residents are respectfully asking that this be placed on the agenda, and so that in order to pass a moratorium on further permitting of these facilities and also allow for a discussion on the dog breeding industry, how it impacts puppies and dogs, and to assess permit conditions, compliance measures, and really the responsibility of the county to the welfare of these animals. Minnesota Statute 394, Section 21 does grant counties the authority to promote the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. In other words, to promote the public interest. The public is interested in how animals are treated, and There really is no humane way to commercially breed a dog in an industrial manner. They're not given the opportunity to really play and cuddle and romp in a home environment with human interaction. This can create psychological trauma. It has been said not to get into the details of animal welfare. We don't believe that's correct. State and federal agencies are not experts in canine welfare. We've done considerable research on both. 3 of the worst puppy mills in Minnesota were convicted of animal cruelty. They were all USDA licensed. And the Board of Animal Health does not have the expertise in canine health and well-being. They are governed by livestock production, and their staff are primarily livestock veterinarians, and this is because their mission is for disease control, as it should be. So this is why actually we've created a companion animal board bill to pull the function of dog and cat breeder enforcement away from them. So if permits are issued, we believe the county has a responsibility to ensure the health and safety of these animals. And we ask, again, respectfully, that you place this topic on the agenda for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks. Is there anyone else, either here in the audience or attending via Ring Central, that would like to make a comment during our public comment period?
This is Bob Volnick from the Mississippi River Regional Planning Commission. I just wanted to mention that I'll be here for your agenda item if there are any questions regarding the port statistical area for the item that Dave included on your agenda.
And just for our record, could you state your address?
531 Hamilton Street in West Salem, Wisconsin.
Okay. Thanks very much. Is there anyone else, either here in the room or attending via Ring Central, that would like to make a public comment? I'm going to ask 2 more times. Is there anyone here in the room or on the internet that would like to make a public comment? If you are on the internet,
Yeah, I apologize. What's the guest? The microphone is green, but that's guest. Is that us?
that's,
None.
I think that is the individual that just spoke. Is there anyone here in the room or on the internet attending via Ring Central that would like to make a public comment? Hearing none, public comment is closed. The next order of business might be to approve the county board minutes from the previous meeting.
I move approval of the county board minutes from June 14th, 2022.
Second.
Commissioner Kvesi has moved, Commissioner Olson has seconded. Approval of the county board minutes of June 24th, 2022. Is there any discussion? I'm sorry, June 14th, 2022. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Next item is our consent comments and the approval of the agenda. Commissioner Ward,
I would like to pull for separate votes on 5.5 and 5.6.
okay,
And then I have an announcement at the end, please.
we'll make those 5.5, 6.01, 5.6, 6.02, and an announcement.
Please, thank you.
Mr. Kvesi.
I have a committee meeting report at the end of the meeting.
Commissioner Olson.
Nothing for me. Nothing for me.
County Attorney Sonneman. Administrator Holte. Okay. So can we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Ward has moved and Commissioner Jacob has seconded approval of our agenda modified as was noted. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Agenda is set. Administrator Holte, could you read the consent agenda for us? The consent business for us off the agenda?
5.1, agreement with Korn Ferry for job classification evaluation. 5.2, approve resolution establishing 2023 minimum salary for elected positions. 5.3, approve renewal of joint powers agreement for emergency management deputy director. 5.4, approve resolution supporting Northern Grain Belt Port statistical area. 5.5 and 5.6 are full. 5.7, approve grant extension with Minnesota Department of Agriculture to continue oriental bittersweet and noxious weed eradication efforts and reporting. 5.8, approve voucher payment to Mitchell and Sarah Steffen for equipment and installation to remove contaminants from water. 5.9, approve joint powers agreement, agreement, and resolution with Minnesota Bureau. 5.10, approve 2022 State of Minnesota Boat and Water Safety Grant Agreement. 5.11, approve renewal of Minnesota Department of Human Services contract to purchase books and to participate in local collaboratives time study. 5.12, authorize disposal of excess furniture and equipment. 5.13, confirm payment of disbursement.
I will move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Commissioner Jacob has moved and Commissioner Kavesi has seconded to approve the consent business as was read into the record. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Ward?
Madam Chair, just a point so that the public understands, and the one gentleman was online for this, approving the resolution supporting the Northern Grain Belt Port statistical area. It's not about the grain belt beer. You know? And when I read that, that was kind of comical because we probably all remember that. But it does create a whole along the river group, and it would allow us in this region to be ranked as one of the top 100 inland-based tonnage handling ports, port areas, which is significant. There are a lot of people across the greater United States that have no concept of the tonnage and the volume of product and everything that's moved through our ports. And Winona is a big part of that, along with the other Goodhue, Wabasha, Winona, Houston, and the other side of the river too, Pierce, Pepin, Buffalo, Trempealeau, Cross Vernon, and Crawford counties. So it is significant, and we are a major port, and a lot of people just have no concept that exists. And as I came up the river this evening, I saw an empty barge. You know, it was riding high in the water, but it'll go down riding low in the water, hauling whatever, commodities. And it's significant that we have this in our region for economic development and all the things that go along with it. So, and the gentleman was kind enough to be here, but I guess we don't have any questions. So, but thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent business as read signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Consent agenda is approved. We move into general business. Item 6.01 was formerly 5.5, which is to approve the ASME Courthouse Unit Amendment 2022.
Yes, Madam Chair, just separate vote. Again, I did not see any of my pay for performance issues addressed at all in this union contract.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Olson has moved and Commissioner Kavesi has seconded that we approve item 6.01, approve ASME Courthouse Unit Amendment 2022. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion carries. 6.02, approve WCHSEA Labor Agreement Amendment 2022 through 2024.
And again, Madam Chair, I just asked for a separate vote. Again, it does not address any pay for performance parameters in this contract.
I move approval of item 6.02.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Kavesi has moved and Commissioner Olson has seconded. Item 6.02, previously 5.6, approve the WCHSEA Labor Agreement Amendment 2022 through 2024. Is there any further discussion?
This is to add a classification, has nothing to do with the pay schedule, so I don't know what your objection is.
Well, Commissioner Olson, it is a new classification, and it is a new area, so it's the prime opportunity to put pay for performance issues into it. That's my hope that someday we'll address.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Anyone opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion carries. We now move on to item 6.1, receive presentation from Minnesota Intercounty Association on annual legislative update, and I see them in the back of the room.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Hello, Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Intercounty Association. For members of the public, just quick background, the Minnesota Intercounty Association is now 15 counties, a volunteer association of 15 of Minnesota's larger counties, not including Hennepin and Ramsey. And we are, as always, grateful to have Winona County continuing as a longstanding member of the association. And we both provide information to you and organize some staff groups that we meet with regularly and monthly to pass along information that is very relevant to you from the operations of state government and to represent interests of Winona County and member counties with the legislature. The legislature completed its work. Well, that was the wrong statement. The legislature ended the session as it was required to do by the Constitution on May 23rd at midnight. And the reality is that we had a historic budget situation in Minnesota. Let me make sure I have this. Where am I pointing? Over here? Oh.
Uh-oh.
That's still not it.
I need to hear it.
I will, thanks for when you work that out, let me know. I'll keep going and
Okay.
let's go back one slide and then I'll be good to go. There we go. So we, the state legislature, I should say, began its budget session with a historic state budget surplus. And I just really want to underscore that because I've been in the business of state budgeting for 20 plus years. And I have never seen numbers this much of a differential, positive or negative, and certainly never positive. So the legislature began with a $9.3 billion general fund budget surplus for the 2022-23 period. And I'm going to just focus your attention on that very bottom line there, estimating, assuming no carry forward. That's $9.3 billion of one-time money available that would have been available for through the period that ends June 30th of 2023. So next year, June 30th. For the next 2-year period, fiscal 24-25, that positive budget condition was projected to continue at a rate of about $3 billion a year for an additional $6 billion of projected available resources. The legislature had $1.2 billion of federal ARPA funds in addition to that, so that they hadn't allocated. So in some ways, you could think about over $10 billion of resource this legislative session. In the end of, and that's on top of budget reserves. Where am I pointing now, Chad? Thank you. Next slide, please. On May 17th, the governor and legislative leaders signed an agreement that I refer to as the 4x4x4 agreement. I think I'm the only one that refers to it that way, but over the 3-year period, they agreed to allocate $4 billion to tax relief $4 billion to supplemental spending changes, and leave $4.2 billion of that unallocated on the bottom line on top of budget reserves. Again, just by comparison, that would have been roughly about, well, I'll get to that. It would have been roughly about 8% of the budget on the bottom line in addition to budget reserves. In the end of the day, conference committees were unsuccessful at resolving differences along the lines of targets that had been set, particularly in the area of K-12 education, which had $1 billion target over those 3 years, human services, which had $1 billion target over those 3 years, public safety, which had a $450 million target for those 3 years, transportation, housing. Tentative agreements were reached on tax relief and property tax relief, on environment supplemental spending, on workforce programs, higher education, state agency appropriations. None of that happened. The agreement was to have a package of all of that come together. And of course, that didn't come to fruition. And so none of that happened, and no bonding bill as well. This is typically a legislative bonding session is the priority. When you have a significant surplus like this, that tends to get a lot of attention. Just by comparison, $1 billion would have been a large surplus in some other years. So just some of those targets were the equivalent of surpluses in some other years. In the end of the day, all of that taxpayer resource is going to remain sitting there sort of unused for either tax relief or spending for public services. There was agreement on a number of standalone bills. I'll touch on some of them. An omnibus drought relief, ag, broadband funding bill, a mental health package, the UI trust fund, insurance trust fund was restored. A frontline workers payments, $500 million one time that was put in place. If we go to the next slide, the area, and I'll talk about tax and fiscal policy, and then Nancy Selesky, Steve Novak will come up and talk about transportation, then Nancy Selesky, and I'll close out with a quick review of some other items. One of the areas, as you know, we focus on because it's so important to counties is property tax and property tax relief in the tax and fiscal policy conversation. The one thing that did pass, I mentioned, was broadband. I know that that is really important to large parts of the state, not because the counties directly administer it. And again, just for the public's purpose, for people who don't know, counties have a significant role that you play, as you all know, in implementing many of the mandatory programs that the state puts in place. And so there's really an important partnership here. So that comes into play with a lot of the items that I'm going to be talking about. But in broadband, this was, and this did pass, the most significant funding amount that will be going into state broadband, I think probably ever. $50 million, $25 million this year, $25 million next year from the general fund, just shy of $61 million from the federal ARPA funds, an estimated an additional $100 million from the federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But I think probably even more exciting and more meaningful, especially for rural parts of the state and low density parts of the state, is that there were a number of policy changes. Under current state law, or previous state law, I should say, broadband grants could only be up to 50% of the project costs. There's now a low density project program that'll allow those costs to be up to 75% of the project costs. There's also a line extension program so that if you're in an area that's served by high-speed broadband, but your property doesn't get service, which happens, a lot of times you're told, oh, you're in a covered area, you get service. Well, you're now going to be able to register with the Department of Employment and Economic Development broadband office. When they verify that your property doesn't have service, there will be a reverse auction for those properties to get service, a line extension to those properties, and each property will have up to a $25,000 subsidy for the work to do that. So what did not happen?
So, Matt,
Yep.
before you leave that, if I could ask a
Yeah,
question.
absolutely.
And I haven't seen it recently, so that's a lot of money going into
Mhm.
broadband. But how much money do we need to get coverage for every household in the state of Minnesota?
The estimate, and I don't have the number exactly off the top of my head, but the estimate to get, so the real quick background is, the first thing the state said is that we were at one level of speed goals, and we're now up to a level of speed goal, I believe, of 100 upload and 25 download is the sort of the second generation. The federal government actually has a 100 expectation for the federal money that's spent. So part of it is some areas might need higher level of service in order to meet enhanced goals. And I believe the number was a couple $100 million statewide for and that is public money, an estimated amount for public money, and of course, private vendors put in
So
money.
we're still short.
We're still short. This should take us a long way. And there are actually some other federal programs. One of that should be bringing money forward. One of the things the legislature decided is these resources we have on the screen here are the most flexible to use, and they can frankly get the job done sooner than the RDF funds and some of the other reverse auction federal monies that are also out there in addition.
Good, thank you.
Yep. So what did not pass? Like I said, there was $4 billion over 3 years that was allocated to tax relief. And just to be clear, nothing that's been talked about that was in that bill ended up passing because the overall package was not, the overall compromises were not finalized and passed. So no Social Security benefit reduction, no individual income tax reduction. There was also going to be historic levels of property taxes that really would have taken action on all of the sort of different levers that are really critical to property tax relief, general aid, refund programs, tax-based changes. So what did not happen is there was going to be $30 million annually in increased county program aid, which would have been, what's my number here for Winona County, about $360,000 annually for Winona County. There was $9.2 million annually put into payment in lieu of taxes for natural resource lands. Winona County has some of those lands. There was $6 million annually for the work of soil and water conservation districts. I estimate about $64,000 for Winona County each year. $30 million in business and seasonal recreational property tax relief. $175 million annually across the renter, homeowner, and targeted. These are the refund programs for property taxpayers. There would have been expanded homestead market value exclusion. So tax relief for homeowners. There would have been an expanded senior deferral program and no levy limits and no limited market value. And of course, I don't have to tell all of you here, the Winona County local option sales tax was also a piece of that package that was not passed for funding your jail costs as well. So those are the, I guess I would say, lowlights. So happy to take any questions. Otherwise, like I said, I'll come back up at the end and close with some comments as well.
Thank you. Steve Novak, I handle the transportation issues for Micah. Nice to be in Winona. We had a great meal downtown and enjoyed the drive in. Let me get right to the point on transportation. I was hoping to be here tonight to describe all of the significant things that were accomplished. Unfortunately, the one thing we can't force them to do is to vote on bills, and they chose not to. So let me tell you the story of how we got there. Our 4 top transportation priorities in Micah this year was to provide the state matching funds so that Minnesota would get all of the eligible federal funds from the massive new infrastructure bill that has passed and become law. Secondly, we were promoting significant millions of dollars for county roads and bridges. And third, we wanted to establish and restructure the funding for the local road wetland replacement program, which has been a big issue the last few years in terms of underfunding from the state. We had 2 years out of the last 5 where the spring construction season was threatened because of that situation. And finally, we wanted to complete the transfer of the sales tax on auto parts. And as I'll explain in a minute, that issue more than any other is what hung up progress on transportation funding this year. Under the category of what happened this year in terms of transportation funding, it's a pretty short report. No major bills were passed. Many were discussed, introduced. All of the things I mentioned were in the bills that they should have been in. They were all into conference committee, and but for the vote of the legislature on the final product, I would have had a very different report tonight in terms of the progress that was made. Probably the tip off to the problem that was coming at the end of the session could be seen in the agendas of the House and Senate Transportation Committees going back to January through April. The committees met regularly in the House and the Senate and Transportation, but the House committee agendas were dominated by things like transit, trains, active transportation, traffic safety, electric car infrastructure. The Senate hearings going on at the same time were dominated by roads and bridges, no trains, Department of Motor Vehicle, the so-called King Report in terms of reforming that, and raising fees on electric cars. So the point is that they were in opposite directions on a number of major issues, left to their own devices, which was setting up their own agendas in terms of what they chose to spend time on. And as someone who was at all the hearings, I can tell you they spent a lot of time on it, but in the end, it didn't come together very well at all. The conclusion of all of this for transportation focused on two major bills at the end of the session. The supplemental transportation funding bill, budget bill, and of course, the hope for bonding bill. The four priorities that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation were all housed in one of those two bills. They all made it into the bills. And just taking them one by one quickly, the matching money for the IIJA, one of the very few public hearings of the Transportation Conference Committee. Both sides publicly, as part of their own testimony, agreed that that should be done, and they allocated the money to do it. It's important to point out on the supplemental transportation bill that the last several years, transportation hasn't really been treated very well by the leadership of either caucus in terms of the money that was allocated to solve issues in transportation. That was not the case this year. The leadership allocated $360 million to transportation for fiscal year 22-23, and it allocated $486 million in fiscal year 24-25, more than enough money to accomplish these priorities that I delineated for you. In terms of local roads and bridges, there was significant money in the supplemental bill. $30 million for county roads was the low number. And in the House bill, they had $80 million for what they called major bridge projects across the state. And then that takes us to the sales tax on auto parts, which is where I think partisan politics kind of intervened, as it did in many places in the budgetary process this year, and became a roadblock to good governing and good results for the people of the state. The opening positions of the House and the Senate on sales tax on auto parts was first, the House opposed the whole concept. Their belief was that general fund money should not be used for transportation, which historically was the case till a few years ago because of the dedicated funding and gas tax and other provisions like that. And so they came off that position and established a position of doing the full 100% transfer at 60% for roads and bridges, 40% for transit. On the other side of the coin, the Senate, who initiated this process back in 2017, where for the first time they transferred money from the sales tax on auto parts, about half of it, and established it in a statutory number of $146 million per year. Their bill finished the job at 100% and dedicated it 100% to roads and bridges, and were definitive that they weren't coming off that mark. As the negotiations continued into the final day, literally, the House moved further from 60-40 to 80-20. The Senate did not move from 100% to zero. That might have been okay if it was just left to that specific issue, but the Senate heightened their pile of poker chips on their end of the table by basically saying, even though we have agreement on things like matching funds for the federal money and so on and so forth, we're not doing anything unless we get our position of 100% transfer to road and bridges, which frankly is a policy we would have preferred, but not at the expense of losing the entire package, which was the result. So that's how the budget bill ended. They never voted on it. The answers to a lot of our questions and challenges were in that bill. But like I said at the beginning, the one thing we can't force them to do is vote, and they chose not to. That takes us to the bonding bill. The bonding bill, if you follow the legislative process at all, what you learn is that bonding chairs, no matter who they are, which party they are, what house they come from, they're good at what they do. And a bonding process never really ends in the legislature. So anytime leadership tells a bonding chair to produce a bonding bill, believe me, within 24 hours, they can produce one at whatever number they're told to get to. And they juggle these things as it goes, but they're always ready. But they have to get the command to do it and bring it to a vote. We were working on a couple things very important for Winona County and all the counties of the state. And by the end of the negotiation on the final day, after I would say literally dozens of meetings with Senator Bach, who is the Senate chair in bonding, and Representative Fu Lee, the House chair in bonding, that there was going to be an agreement for $75 million each for county roads, county bridges, which in the perspective of a 40-year cycle would have been a high watermark. So we're talking significant money for the county road and bridge system, which, as you know, works really quite well and is coordinated to a high degree with MnDOT. There's not a lot of arguing over which projects come next. They're in a queue line and they're ready to go. They're engineered, they're ready to go, but for the money. So as that money comes in, those projects go out, and your county engineers do a significantly good job at all of that. The other issue that would have been resolved finally is the local road wetland mitigation program. For about 3 years now, we've been working, negotiating with Bowser to be the home agency on a permanent basis with a line item for this program. And they had agreed to that, testified to it, and working with the key chairman on this in both houses, we believe very strongly, based on what they told us, that this was going to happen. The money for it to bring everything current rolling forward was $14 million in bonding, $6 million in cash, because we're still behind in terms of having live wetland credits ready to go. So the cash is there because you have to go into the private market to buy it, and it's much more expensive. The combination of the two, with the inclusion in the Bowser budget, would have finally accomplished the goal that we set a few years back. As you know, when this doesn't work right, your spring construction season is threatened. Your relationship with your local contractors is abused. And we were trying once and for all to mitigate that situation. And it was right there. But again, in the end, there was no vote on a bonding bill. So that, unfortunately, is the conclusion to the report. The only encouraging thing I can say is that there's still an outside chance, depending on circumstances that we cannot control, that we would have a special session and they'd pick these bills up where they're at. And where they're at is they're completed, except they have to vote on them. And if not, then we have to pick it up next January, and significant opportunities, will be lost, and time will be lost. And time matters on a lot of these issues, particularly the local road wetland mitigation program. The final thing I want to say is that, and you already know this because he's your employee, but we spend a lot of time with Dave Kramer. Our MICA engineers meet every month in a meeting that I run. We develop our transportation platforms through that process year to year. Dave is a significant participant in all of that. And he's also become a good friend over the years. So we value him, as I know you do. And once again, it's very nice to be here. Wish I had a slightly better report for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question, we've heard rumors about a gas holiday tax. It seems like that's dropped off the last couple of days because it really affects, people don't realize how detrimental that could be because that funds our roads and bridges and it creates a big hole.
A
So
lot of us realize it.
general public.
I mean, I think it's fair to say, partisanship aside, that it's a political maneuver, whether it's at the state or the federal level. It's not good policy. I would argue it's not even good politics because the way they've designed it, it's on a short lease. It would last for 3 to 4 months and they'd have to renew it, a month or two before the election. So I don't quite get the political point. And the damage that it would do, the way it's currently structured in Minnesota, would be significant to road and bridge infrastructure. At the federal level, I mean, if you just believe what people tell you, the president has been very public about the fact that he understands that negative and claims that he would fill it with other federal revenues, basically that are still left over from the COVID money and so forth. But, that's a roll of a dice that I wouldn't want to be paying for.
But they don't seem to be talking about, there doesn't seem to be the push right now, the last few days. Anyway.
Well, I think the logic or the illogic of the proposal is starting to catch up to the emotion of the politics, and things are moderating out. And as they do, I think they'll move farther away from that than closer to it, whether it's the state or the federal.
Before you leave town, I would recommend that you go to the east end of town and go through our newest amusement park ride, the MnDOT creating a roundabout.
Oh,
And so I want you to take advantage of it in its preliminary phase and then come back next year when or is it 2 years that it's going to be done?
November this year.
This year, okay, and such. So it's one of MnDOT's greatest projects in
Okay.
southeast Minnesota.
I hope it's still daylight so I can do that.
Yeah, you'll need daylight. I haven't maneuvered it in the
I'm
dark.
not a big fan of roundabouts either.
Tough. All right.
Yes.
I have a question. Without the bonding bill this year, which was their responsibility, is it safe to say that with interest rates and assuming we do get a bonding bill next year, would it be safe to say that the money will go not as far because of increased rates?
Well, if the rates go up, I guess that would be a fair
Yeah.
statement.
Materials.
So we're missing this year's and we may not have as much available for next year because the costs are going up. Okay.
Well, I used to give legislative reports, so I would suggest the next time a legislator comes by, you might want to ask them that. I'm sure they'll enjoy it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Selesky, and I handle public health and human services for MICA. And it's a pleasure to be here this evening. So while there was no budget bill, as everyone has talked about, on that very last night of session, the legislature did come to an agreement on a fairly comprehensive mental health bill. They spent $93 million on mental health that contained a number of county priorities, including increased funding for adult mental health initiative grants. And this was in response to a DHS proposed reform, which would have taken existing funding and spread it out amongst more initiatives. So basically, stealing from Peter to pay Paul. So we wanted to increase the pool there. So we're successful in getting an additional $20 million in the system, and then that holds the existing initiatives harmless. So any AMHI region will not receive less than the amount that they received in fiscal year 22 under that language. Another priority for counties was related to competency restoration. The deal that was struck creates a state competency restoration board within the judiciary system, and they provided funding for forensic navigator services for those individuals that are deemed not competent to stand trial. This was a win for counties because at one time there were proposals that we should act as that forensic navigator or sort of a case manager and help deliver the services there. And again, they created a state board and funded it with $11 million a year. Also, an additional $5 million goes to the district courts for competency restoration examination costs. Other investments in mental health included increasing the mobile crisis base by $4 million, They address children's mental health by creating and funding children's residential crisis stabilization services. And they did direct DHS to seek federal approval for that. They put about $1.2 million into mental health urgency rooms, $2 million into shelter-linked mental health grants, and $2 million into school-linked behavioral health grants. So that bill was signed into law by the governor a couple of weeks ago. I should have said to advance the slides, a couple here, I'm sorry. I guess just one, there we are. Another standalone bill that passed during the session related to the opioid settlement. Governor Walz did sign this bill into law, and the bill basically creates a framework for distributing the $300 million that Minnesota is going to be receiving as part of the settlement that we came to an agreement with the opioid distributors and manufacturers. As you know, cities and counties are getting 75% of those settlement dollars directly, which is about $222 million. The other 25% will be distributed through grants that are administered by DHS for opioid education and prevention programs. The language does require that we, counties and cities that receive these direct appropriations, report annually to DHS as to how those dollars have been expended. Governor Walz again signed that bill into law as well. When it became clear again that there wasn't going to be a budget bill, the conference committee did put together a few items in a policy bill that I'll just give you, policy only, that costs no money, that they did pass again that last night of session. And I'll just give you a couple of samples of what was in that. They expanded the scope of mental health data that can be shared with law enforcement agencies who are responding to people that are undergoing a mental health crisis. They established the opioid substance use and addiction subcabinet within the executive branch. They did increase eligibility for SNAP from 165% to 200% of federal poverty guidelines. And under that, counties must verify the federal work requirements for those SNAP households. They did extend the amount of time a homeless person or family can stay in transitional housing from 24 to 36 months as well. So again, that was a policy-only bill that was also signed into law. So what didn't happen? Almost everything that didn't cost money, with the exception of the mental health package that I addressed. I just want to kind of point out the differences between the Senate and House priorities on the budget bill that they were looking at passing. The Senate had the budget bill passed, wanted to spend the $1 billion mostly on long-term care workforce issues. And I know that's a big deal down here and everywhere. These dollars would have gone to for pay increases for people working in nursing facilities, home care providers, PCAs, also increased rates for non-emergency medical transportation. That was the Senate priorities. The House, in addition to long-term care, also wanted to invest in childcare and the homeless. And they had over $100 million proposed in public health, which would have included family home visiting and emergency preparedness. And finally, the House also had wanted to increase general assistance for single adults. So those were kind of the differences between the two, which they were wrestling with up until the end. The last thing I would mention is the Child Protection Legislative Task Force is starting up again. This is something that was created in 2015 in response to the death of a child at the hands of a parent. The legislature responded by putting together a report that included 93 recommendations to address problems within the child protection system. And a lot of that, of course, has impacted counties. This group has kind of been dormant for the last several years, and they did appoint a couple of chairs this year, so they're starting to look at that again. The House co-chair is Representative Dave Pinto from St. Paul, and then Senator Mark Johnson from East Grand Forks is the co-chair in the Senate. And we've had one meeting thus far in June. They're talking about meeting monthly, and what they're starting with is reviewing those 93 recommendations and see where changes can be made. Too early to determine what's going to come out of that, but they are meeting. Finally, I also want to call out your staff. I work closely with Karen Sanis, and she's always at all of our meetings, and I know that you appreciate her. Just want to call her out as well. And with that, I'd answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, in the interest of time, I will really just expedite through these last couple of slides. Corrections and public safety, another area where we do some work and collaborate. If we could go back one slide. Competency restoration, opioid data sharing. Nancy talked about all of those because they do intersect with human services and public safety, and we have them on here also. Really, nothing underscores the concept of state mandates that are put in place more than the work that Nancy does in human services, where the state passes the laws, puts the programs in place, counties are directed and mandated to administer them. Oftentimes, the state does not fully fund those programs, and as you all know, that means that property tax dollars or other resources end up having to be added to fulfill those state requirements. Another one of those areas is in community corrections and probation services. For quick background, there's 3 systems in the state. Counties either have to choose to administer and oversee both felons and misdemeanors themselves through a Community Corrections Act county, or they can choose to oversee the probation and services for misdemeanors only, and the state will oversee the felons. That's the county probation officer model. Or, as is the case here, I believe in Winona County, you contract with the Department of Corrections to oversee both felon caseload and misdemeanors. That is critical in Minnesota. Minnesota is a state that has low crime rates relative to other states, but also does so in a system that relies much more heavily on sentencing to community supervision. And the reality is that only about 25 to 30% of the total costs for something that is a state responsibility is funded by state funding, and the rest falls on property taxpayers at the local level. This was going to be the first significant increase in equitable distribution across all 3 of those systems. Counties, all 87 counties had worked on it extensively. During the interim, there was going to be roughly a $25 million a year in the Senate, ramping up in the House proposal to $38 million a year to get roughly to a 50-50% cost share of the funding, along with all of the other, and that's only $38 million a year out of the $450 million target that was available for public safety. Those differences were unable to be resolved, and so nothing happened there. There was also money under consideration for emergency management, armor, radio, very small amount, and some crossover youth grants. If we could go to the next slide, another area of county responsibility that we did significant work on that falls into the environment area. Again, nothing ended up passing in the end, but it is, counties have a lead role in solid waste management. The solid waste management tax is basically a user tax paid by businesses and homeowners and renters. And despite counties being the only entity of government that have an accountability for recycling and reuse in meeting state goals, less than 20% of that user tax currently goes back to counties in the form of SCORE grants to do that work. This was going to be the first significant increase. Everything was positioned. It was in the bills. There was money in the tax bill, about $3 million a year, by shifting some of that user fee that goes into the state general fund over to county SCORE grants, plus money in the environmental bill from the environmental fund for the same purpose would have been roughly a 15 to 20% increase in SCORE grants annually. That did not happen. There was also going to be some repayment of closed landfill trust funds, oddly enough, back from past budget deficits where money was stolen from those funds and has not yet been paid back despite having a significant budget surplus. Yet another thing that was not able to get across the finish line. So let me go to the next slide just in the interest of time, and happy to answer any questions. But where does that leave us all? A little north of, next slide, please, $7 billion left on the bottom line unallocated for this biennium, an additional $5 billion left on the bottom line for a projected positive budget condition ongoing. And just incidentally, again, even if all of the package that was agreed to on the 17th in terms of the 4x4x4 agreement would have been finalized and passed into law, there would still be record level of state budget reserves in place, plus a significant amount, $4 billion of unallocated balance on the bottom line. A very healthy state budget position would have remained. Final slide, if I can go to the next slide. Where does that leave us? In absence of a special session, the next regular session begins at noon on Tuesday, January 3rd, as determined by the Constitution. And of course, we know that just from retirements alone, there's going to be at least a third of the legislators in both the House and the Senate will be new members to the House, and there will be new members to the House and Senate just from retirements alone. And of course, once the voters weigh in, presumably more change than that. So a significant a number of new legislators will be expected next session. So that's the circumstance we have that we're preparing for in 2023. Happy to answer any questions.
Matt, can you explain what's the biggest contributing factor to this surplus? Is it income tax, sales tax, fees and licenses? What is creating, this type of dollars, and that department still has jobs. I mean, with their estimating is so off. And then we're even estimating 5 billion going forward. But if you really listen to the news and everything, they're talking we're going into recession, slowdown. So what contributes to that surplus? Where's it coming from?
Good question. My takeaway from reading both the November and the February forecast and having followed this line of work for a number of years, really two things going on. If you go back to sort of before the pandemic hit and then during the pandemic, it didn't hit everybody equally, and it hit low-wage workers harder in terms of who was out of work. So less income tax and other tax revenues come from that sector of communities. And so in the end of the day, as you probably may have also read in the paper, corporations were reporting record profits. The corporate income tax receipts for the state were up significantly. Income tax receipts were up significantly, and those two things, as well as sales tax, accounted for the bulk of the increased revenues.
And now we also read that Target is having a big sale.
Well,
because they've got merchandise they have to move, and
and it's not clear how much that'll affect their profits as opposed to it'll affect prices. They have more inventory, so maybe it'll help bring prices down at
a lot of
the store.
mixed signals out there.
It's not terribly surprising. It's been a roller coaster of activity in America and across the world, and continues to be, and that is certainly true in the economy and with the pandemic and all of the shifts and sorting out that comes along with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I would just, happy to take any more questions, but otherwise in closing, I just want to also add my thanks, Commissioner Meyer and Commissioner Ward, for your service on the MICA board. Greatly appreciate it. We are, of course, run by a board of members from each of the counties and that are part of the association, and really appreciate the input. Thank you, Maureen, for your work and support and participation in the MICA administrators meeting. And I love coming down to Winona County. I think I probably remind you every time I'm down here, but I grew up in Houston County, so it's nice to be able to come someplace where I can shut off the GIS tracking device and find my way to Winona without any help. So
There you go.
thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
And see you. Appreciate it.
Safe travels back.
Next item of business would be 6.2, to consider approving the amended resolution to establish the absentee ballot board.
I do have a question for Sandra.
Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, Sandra? So we have confirmed ballot board participants. We have 12, and not knowing everybody on that line, but is that a equally balanced among the two major parties?
It is.
Okay, and they were on Mr. Bear's approved, the Republican list that he provided us?
Okay,
And you cross
So-
referenced?
correct. So the situation that developed was in May, we received an updated judge list from the Secretary of State's office. The Republican Party submitted names, the Democratic Party did not. So the Republican Party was basically a duplication of what we received 2 years prior in 2020. The Democratic Party, what ended up happening is the chair of the Democratic Party here in Winona County provided names to me after the fact. So for the May ballot board, we had an adequate we had 2 vacancies, and those vacancies were due to not having enough Democratic judges. But now for the August primary board, we have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, and I do believe I just basically took the Republicans that had served in May and placed them on the August primary board. And then the other thing was one of my staff had been on ballot board for the May special primary, and because we are having a primary in the auditor treasurer race, she's no longer eligible to serve on ballot board. And that was the second reason why I established this new ballot board.
Okay, and then the confirmed individuals serving as deputy auditor treasurers, they don't have to be party affiliated? They're all staff, they're all employees?
Correct.
And there isn't
But-
a mandate or anything that they're party affiliation?
Correct. However, I do want to point out, if they don't already have election judge certification, I will be requiring them to take the election judge course. And then in the event we do have to convene as a ballot board, I will be taking party declarations at that time, but obviously that is just my information that I'm privy to.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Ms. Uchala, I'm sorry, Commissioner Jacob, go ahead.
So as I look at the list and I compare it against the list that I got from David Bayer, I see 4 of the names that are confirmed on his list. So I'm wondering, can I ask David Bayer, could you, I have a question for you. You want to come to the podium? So have you reviewed the Appendix A on the county boards?
No, I have not, but I can do that right now, or you
Yeah.
can throw it up and I can look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it would be page 155. I've got the names right here.
I'd be happy to loan you my paper copy.
In fact, I think the only place we differed was on Mary Botten and Laurel Mulger.
Okay, I can actually vouch for both of them being Republicans, so that is, yeah, perfectly okay.
And not only that, they were on the judge list, and I also went one step further and I made certain that they had completed judge training. So they were already eligible, up and running to be ballot.
I guess if I may, Madam Chair, I guess the whole point of me doing this is because I wanted this body to have a list of vouched for people to meet those requirements. And I also included my email and phone number on here, so if there's a question in the future, me being the chairman, I would be happy to provide names or whatever in the future. That was the whole point of it. So
Thank you.
If you're comfortable with this list, I certainly
Did you want to see my copy? Just ignore my scribbles.
We've got 6 confirmed Republicans, so that leaves
For a total of 12.
6 that would be Democrats.
I had a question and now I can't remember what. Oh, is 12 enough? That was my question.
I guess initial indications would tell me yes. And I guess in the event we discover that we need additional ones, then I would probably just simply, once again, go back to my judge lists, make sure that they are on those judge lists, that they've received training. And if you'd like a courtesy email from me or an additional agenda item on a future board meeting, just let me know. We, as a ballot board, will need to continue to meet right up until August 9th.
With the August 9th primary deadline, this is the group that will monitor that. And then will this same group of people do the other upcoming elections?
It depends.
Okay.
It
But they're committed to the August 9th.
definitely,
Okay,
yes.
so we
That
may
that
have
is
to-
my standing board for the August 9th primary.
Okay, and we'll wait and see if we need anything different this fall.
Right.
election.
As you said, if I see an increase in participation, we may need to add additional members for the November general.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve 6.2.
Second,
Commissioner Jacob has moved and Commissioner Ward has seconded an approval of the amended resolution to establish the absentee ballot board. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, say no. Okay, motion passes. Next item is 6.3, appoint 2 county board members to the Joint Airport Zoning Board. This board doesn't meet often, but because we had zoning changes, it has been meeting in 2021 and then into. And Commissioner Olson and I have been the representatives to the board.
Well, I'll nominate both Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Meyer to continue on that board.
I'll second.
So Commissioner Jacob has moved to appoint Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Meyer as the county board members on the Joint Airport Zoning Board, and Commissioner Ward has seconded this. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion passes.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Meyer and Commissioner Olson.
It was interesting. I learned some things about airport zoning that I didn't know. Item 6.4, discuss, modify, or approve the American Rescue Plan Funds grant requests.
Nothing to discuss.
Can I just ask, just to give an overview of how this was arrived at, this list? Just-
I'm gonna have Laura, please, so she can come up to the. Laura has been instrumental in helping. bring it to fruition, so.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the grant applications for the ARP funds. First, I'd just like to share that there were, obviously, as you can see, a plethora of applications for limited funds. And I just want to express appreciation to all of the grant applicants because it does take time and energy to put together the information needed. So we used a system called Submittable that the county board approved some time back to actually form an application and set up a process to then receive those applications and review them. The application window was open through the end of May. We then reviewed the applications kind of as they came in and had sort of a scoring or or rubric system with the ability to add notes and comments, be able to assign the appropriate U.S. Treasury code, and note how it might connect to the Winona County strategic plan, as well as any other needs or issues that have been identified in the county through the Engage Winona survey and other areas. So once the applications were reviewed, as we came to the close of the application window, I then met with Maureen and discussed all of the applications, looked at what would have the greatest impact across the county geographically, as well as the number of people who would be impacted, how would I met identified needs through the Engage Winona survey, through identified needs within the county, and then looked at how much money we had available and kind of looked at what those priorities were, and then put together the package that you see here for your review and discussion. Does that help answer the question?
This is a big task, and thank you for all that worked on it. But at this point, I received this information, I think, Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday, which I did appreciate getting it a little ahead of the county board packet. There's a lot of projects that didn't get funded, and there's a lot of projects that did get funded. But I need a little more time to digest this and to really determine, go back and look at what the money was really, what the ARPA funds were really intended to do. And as the list stands today of the recommended ones, I have a little difficulty with some of them, spending that money for those particular projects. Not that there's not bad projects, but again, we're being asked to be responsible for a lot of money.
Yes.
And in a very responsible way. So I would entertain the idea of letting us look at this for, at least a couple more days, and maybe have a working session before our next county board meeting or immediately afterwards to kind of digest and go through some of the projects. And I did submit some questions, and thank you. I got very quick responses. I appreciate that. But again, it's just, there's a lot here to say, yeah, go ahead tonight for me. So I would propose a working session after our next regular scheduled county board meeting to, have some more questions and answers if need be. And there's no, this money is available till 2024.
Correct.
So we're not in a real high sense that we got to spend it today.
The money must be expended by December 31, 2024. There are some, I will just note, there are some projects in here that have requested multi-year funding, and then there are other projects within the paperwork that you have that are looking to do maybe shorter term projects that would end in 2022. So while you're correct, there's no time sensitive, the money is going to be lost if we don't spend it. There are some projects that have a little bit of time sensitivity.
Okay.
If I may note one other thing, I just wanted to highlight that there are the special project funds, which my understanding is that this board determined were to be used within the community for particular special projects that would impact the community. There is a broadband request within this document as well that is beyond the HBC allocated broadband initiative that was again approved by this board some time ago. And then there again, finally, are internal projects that are within the county organization of government within different departments to address special needs, particular projects that would be moved forward.
I would love to see, it looks to me like the highly recommended projects came with some thought put into how many people it would serve, as opposed to would it serve one business or would it serve multiple people? That if we do have a working session, that maybe that would be shared with us, because I think that that's significant. And then I wonder, and this question is really kind of more for the board, for some of the bigger expenditure projects, would you like to know more? I mean, would you like to give anyone who's asking, let's say, over $100,000 to actually come give us a 5 or 10-minute presentation. I mean, some of these projects I know more about just because I'm out in the community and I've just heard about them through rumors. And it might be good for everyone to have the opportunity. Let's say I recently was at the Hometown Resource Center for something completely different, but talked to them about the number of clients that they serve. So I know that they have a leaking roof on the food shelf, right? And that they have water in the basement. But it might be interesting for the full board to hear some of that information. I don't know.
The dollar parameter wouldn't help them. No, it wouldn't. It's only $10,000. It isn't 100,000.
If I
But
may,
that's an excellent idea because you're right. Some of these, I have limited knowledge of what they would be doing with the funds.
I can definitely add more detail to the planned project information and for sure include approximated number of people impacted, communities impacted. If there's other specific information, obviously, this is already a number of pages. So in contribution to your 200-page board packet this evening, we wanted to minimize as much as we could. But if there are other specific things, if I don't already have that information in the application, I can communicate with the applicant organization to gather that.
If the rest of the board is interested in that. And Commissioner Ward, for you specifically, are you interested in the same sort of information for the county department project?
Yes, because what I have here is very brief and sketchy. Yes, that would be very advantageous.
Yeah, I can see that there's been a tremendous amount of time put into this. I'm a little concerned about starting to ask certain individual groups to come in and who gets how much time. It could really get fairly messy. To say we picked a number of $100,000 and someone was just under that and they said, well, we should ask for more. And so I feel like the board needs to adjust what's here before we would entertain who we would want to potentially bring into it. I kind of am inclined to want to stay as much as possible with what's here.
I believe you have much more information that you have that we don't have, which would go into what you're requesting is, let's look at what we do have, aside from a 200 and some page board packet. I don't want to second guess your work. I greatly appreciate the amount of work that went into this, and I realize it's difficult, and you have to make sure that they are allocated to the right funds and can be spent in this way. So I appreciate the work, and I would agree to looking at just a little bit more information on what you do have here.
Administrator Holton.
Madam Chair, if we may go back, compile more data for you, send it out, and then perhaps bring this back at the next board meeting for you to decide, are you ready to make some decisions, or do you then want a working session? Would that be acceptable?
Sure.
Yeah, I would appreciate more information, including numbers, but also, more, some of the phrases under planned project, I don't think really represent, exactly what could be in that project. I'm not sure. But again, knowing what people in the community are asking for, what the Engage Winona listed as priorities, I think it would be very helpful to have more information. And I do appreciate the work that has gone on so far. I do not want to second guess that work, but I just need a little bit more information to describe the project numerically, also, more details about the projects.
Ward, I do have a question, and maybe I heard it wrong somewhere. Didn't the federal government change the rules here late in the game that we chose to distribute our funds out within the community? But didn't they change the game plan that if you got under such a dollar amount, you didn't have to do it, you could just take the money, the county? Something changed late in the game I mean, we had already started to work through this process.
I mean, I guess I thought I heard at that, the district meeting, the AMC district meeting,
It was
it was under 10 million.
yeah, if you got less than 10 million, the county could just take it and spend it.
You could
On
use, you could
themselves.
utilize it all considered as revenue recapture
Right.
within the county in whatever way you choose. It could be within county government or just within the county.
Right.
But you are
But not-
correct. That
yeah.
did change.
That did change and such. And so I know some of the smaller counties were just taking it and, so I still want to do this and I think it's an admirable project, but it's a huge project. And so we need to get more information. Thank you.
Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, I also have a question on any follow-up after the awards are made.
Sure.
What kind of reporting, who they report to, how we're going to manage that if it comes back to us. Hopefully no discrepancies, those kinds of issues. Because to me, that's pretty critical too.
If I may, I can address part of that now, and obviously Ms. Holte can add to that. And then if there are things that you are not hearing that you would like included, we can be sure to improve that process. So through the submittable program, there is messages that are trackable, so to speak. There are forms that we plan to use because all of these grants will be on a reimbursement model. So there will be a reimbursement request form for which receipts and appropriate documentation will be required. And I have and will continue to work with Pat Moga on that process. There's also what I would call a relatively straightforward and simple impact documentation process. So that would include, if the goals of their intended project were met, the impacts that had in terms of number of people, if that was a component of it, or were the actual, let's say, structural upgrades made, and how did that allow them to better serve the community? And then any roadblocks or barriers that they may have encountered if the project is unable to be completed or has maybe stalled for any particular reason. And so those reports will be asked of the participants annually at least. And I don't know if you'd like to add anything in addition.
Yes, the system also, correct me if I'm saying it wrong. The system will also help us track where we're at in total as far as funds and expending to make sure that we're not over expending. Or if we're running the opposite where people are not completing their projects and we have more monies that we can maybe reallocate. It also, we've worked out a process where between finance, Laura and myself, we will be in essence triple checking payments to make sure everything's in order before it actually gets paid. So I think overall we've got a pretty tight ship.
Was that system purchased with some of these dollars?
With these dollars, yes,
Okay,
correct.
So we're not expending more county property tax to keep track of money. Okay, it was another pot of money, bigger pot of money.
Once we get past the December 31st, 2024 deadline, and we're monitoring what's happening with the funds, and we get to somebody who was unable to use the funds or whatever the case may be. Are you saying, do we have the flexibility to reallocate those, or do those then go back?
Our goal would be to ensure that before December 31st, 2024, the funds are either expended or we are aware that they will not be expended. There is a process within U.S. Treasury guidelines to request expending the funds beyond December 31st, 2024. I am unclear if that has actually been identified in terms of what that process is. I would imagine it might be cumbersome. I don't know that for sure, but it is a federal program. So I think ensuring that, by, let's say, August 2024, we would have a clear understanding if there will be excessive or additional funds that were unspent, and then allocating and spending them in that maybe last 6-month window would be ideal, but things happen and there's the possibility.
So an 18-month window, so to speak, and what I heard from you, Commissioner Ward, is there's no urgency to act on this tonight, but it's also, it would be prudent to act on it sooner rather than later.
Yes.
I agree. I mean, there are groups out there waiting for this money
Well-
for this year,
Yeah.
but 2 more weeks should allow us to
Yeah.
make some better choices.
Well, I think, yeah,
And-
it merits us given that much consideration too, but my goal would be to, not wait until mid-2024 or, get the community involved in trying to buy for the funds and delay it. I mean,
They've already done that.
this is gonna be, it's gonna be our decision to,
We're going to get more information prior to our next board meeting and then decide if we're ready or not to allocate. Yep.
Does the board need to then table this until the next meeting?
that's just what I was wondering.
Yeah,
whether that-
I would be more comfortable with someone,
I'll move to table till, what is the date of the next meeting? July? What?
Oh, June.
No, July.
Oh, 12, I thought you said the 4th.
Oh.
No, I'm not going to be here on the 4th. Okay, the 12th.
Yeah.
I won't be here on the 4th.
I don't think anyone will.
okay, so Commissioner Ward, you're moving to table
table.
this until
Till-
July 12th, our next
12th,
meeting.
July
I'll
12th.
second it.
Okay.
Would I be able to express concern or comment about this? That's what I showed up for.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think not. But thank you. You'd be welcome to email us if you want. Okay, so Commissioner Ward has moved and Commissioner Jacob has seconded to table item 6.4, discuss, modify, approve American Rescue Plan Funds grant requests. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of tabling this signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Say nay. Okay, motion passes. Item 6.5 is to discuss the audio video abilities in the county boardroom.
So is this officially before the board? This isn't our third.
This is the third one, isn't it?
I
It's
do
the
have
real
a
dis- it's
request
the
in
real discussion.
regards to our process with that. If we could put a little 1, 2, 3 or something, or 3 stars or 2 star, where we are in the process, because we've all agreed it's confusing how we do this.
I
So,
usually remember the second time, but by the third time I frequently.
yeah, where are we at? I think this is the third. I
This is the
think.
real,
This
Yeah.
is real?
this is
Yeah.
the real discussion
Yeah.
tonight.
So, yeah, so I had asked to have this on the agenda based on constituents approaching me about, for instance, right now in that corner of the video, had the back of the speaker.
Yeah.
And the constituent said, "Well, wouldn't that make much more sense to have the front of the speaker so you could maybe read the lips along with hearing the voice?" So a number of pieces like that just seem just common sense that we should be moving toward.
Yeah, I actually have a lot of issues with this room. I remember looking at the blueprint, at the drawings of the size and shape of the room and trying to visualize how we would function in this room. And when we're actually now trying to function in this room, it's still hard to visualize. There are people I cannot see. There are people that cannot see me. The auditory levels vary a lot, what you can hear at different parts of the room. I just have a lot of issues with the functionality of this room, basically. It worked fine as offices for our staff. I'm not sure how it's working as a boardroom.
Well, my goal by bringing this forward would be to make any improvements that we can make. And
I can probably speak.
Well, and with some budget request or staff, they know what we can do and can't do. with this
Yeah,
room.
little background. So this system in this room was installed in April 2020, I believe, before my time here. I don't know if you've noticed, it's been functioning a lot better in the last couple of months. We put some user group testing together. If you remember, there's a lot of echo, a lot of feedback. We fixed all that with a new audio processor, which was under warranty. So that didn't cost us anything. As far as Steve's request for, you can see my back as I'm speaking now. There is a way to manually do that. And I can just go over here and push a button and it'll rotate it to where you can see me speaking. But it is a manual process.
I have to reach over there.
So it's whether or not we want someone actually.
Give her the training.
Yeah, if we need, it is very basic and it's something that it's very easy to do, but I don't know if that merits having someone here at every board meeting doing that. There is a way, there's different equipment that can do facial recognition. When you're speaking, it'll zoom in on you. When I'm speaking, it'll zoom in. It's very costly. There's different
It's not a
systems that we
budget.
could replace that with, but it's not cheap. So there's a couple different options, manually doing it like that, so you can be seeing someone. You notice we did improve the audio, so people in the back can probably hear me pretty well now.
Back there, Margaret, can you hear us?
Can't hear Maureen. Can hear when she talks.
Oh, okay, turn her mic up.
We
Do we have volume set?
Yeah, and a lot of that, when we were testing, we did find that it was on the user end, behind a paperwork or whatever. We had some looping issues with people calling in. But if you want to present some options or requests, I can work with Maureen to work with our vendor to see, if we can.
Is there some way to improve the visual sight lines?
The
The doors?
sliding door be removed.
I was looking at that earlier today,
Permanently.
that's an interesting camera placement up there behind the TV. Because when we zoom it this way, that divider is in the way. This room, when I think it was set up to have it as a double meeting space. So
Yes.
it could,
Yes.
have two
Multi.
things at once. So it is a little awkward. But that would be something that we'd have to talk with maintenance about and
The
work
permanent
through.
wall, no, but you would think that the panels, the movable panels could be just taken down.
sure,
permanently.
I don't think they've moved
The,
in a
the
while.
one thing that I have heard is that it is for folks in the back or in the audience, that yes, it's hard to see, but it's really hard to hear, especially if anyone in the back is talking.
Mhm.
Now, I can't hear them talking.
That should be improved. With that
From
new
the
sound
podium?
processor, I
No.
think it is better, but
No, if there are folks whispering to each other in the back, then other individuals in the back can't hear us.
okay. Yeah, that's just the
Maybe
room.
just a better
yeah,
mic or
yeah.
a
We have
mic,
to shush them,
Shush them.
shush them.
maybe a mic that comes, up more to the,
Right, if you had that mic that
Yeah.
was mounted on a,
we can put you on an elevated platform, Commissioner Kavesi. so they
I
can see
just
you.
hear comments from people regularly that, it's difficult to follow the discussions at the meetings when you can't hear
Yeah.
or see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I do think it's improved. I think it's much better than it was a couple months ago. What I can do is I can work with our vendor that installed the system. We can throw some options at you just, to see if you want to go with the software that can, pick up voices and facial expressions.
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing I noticed tonight when we had the presentation from Micah, so we have to have somebody
Yep.
manually switch the slides.
Yeah,
So-
so Heidi is running the meeting and she has the slide deck and so.
So we do have somebody manually doing it, and then they could be sitting there, or they're sitting over there doing it, so,
She used to be in the
right.
So that that
So,
could be an option.
so we can accomplish what you just did by having somebody sitting there instead of there.
I believe so, yeah.
We'll just do the newest elected commissioner gets the job of running the camp, we'll have a new one.
The only other thing I could imagine is if the whole table was shifted somehow a little bit to that side to give the folks
Yeah.
on this side a better angle. at
Yeah,
that
the
side.
problem with that is, again, I think maintenance would have to get involved. There's manual wiring that goes in and it's coming up through conduit in the floor. So there's actual concrete that was broken into, I'm
great.
guessing.
Okay.
I've
To
heard
run
they've
it.
just placed the better looking people in it.
I can't comment on that.
Administrator Holden.
I also believe that the reason of the placement was due to OSHA rules as far as walking space.
Oh, sure.
But we have to have egress goals. I mean, you can't back people up against the wall in case we have to exit in an emergency.
Handicap accessibility.
I mean, I know we considered things as we put this room together, and this table cost a ton of money. And then the rewiring and the re-IT and the
It was about
updates.
$90,000
Yeah.
for the system.
So, I mean, I'd like to see it as functional as possible if this is what we have to use.
Right.
Um,
I can put together some information from the vendor and
I think
forward
that
it.
would be very appropriate. Ms. Paulson?
Well, I appreciate the improvements that you have made
Yes.
using our existing software and just, under warranty even. So that's good.
And we
Just barely. Usually
Yeah.
it's a month after. It was the month before.
So that's
We
nice.
got lucky.
Yeah, and it is nice not to have all the feedback and
Yeah.
people having to, like, not being,
Yes. Yep.
make
Yep.
people uncomfortable.
Yep. And we can take chairs out and have stand-up meetings and it'd be shorter. We know that. Proven. That's proven.
I'll put some things together and we'll just, I'll bring that forward.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, next item is 6.6, to approve or deny a future agenda item to conduct a formal review of the 2020 state audit and consider reviewing state audits every year. Commissioner Kavesi, would you? Sure, take over. Thanks. This is an item that I had asked for, and I want to start by apologizing because, as our former administrator said in an email to us this week, we have all had access to that audit report since September of last year. So this is the letter that accompanied the previous audit. And it is indeed addressed to the Board of Commissioners. And so that makes it my responsibility and all of our responsibility. But it wasn't until the kickoff meeting this year that I heard the folks from the auditor's office say we had a material weakness in internal controls over our government programs compliance. And what that means, and this is the letter, a material weakness in internal control over compliance is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control over compliance such that there's a reasonable possibility that a material non-compliance with the type of compliance requirement of a federal program will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. And we also had a significant deficiency, which is a little less severe, yet it is important enough to merit the attention of those charged with governance, which is all of us. So I would still very much like to have a review of the 2020 audit results to better understand what the importance and severity of the weaknesses are, simply because that description sounds, serious enough to me that it deserves our attention. And I would want to make sure that we're taking corrective action because it has existed for several years. And I would like us to have a practice of always reviewing the audit with the full board and in public. As our former administrator said to us, audits are complicated. And a review from the state auditor would help all of the commissioners better understand the significance of the findings. And I make this suggestion after talking to someone who's on the school board and someone who's on the Winona City Council, because both of those bodies do their annual audit reviews in public as a sign of transparency.
I know I had wanted to move this forward and I would still do so. Support that coming forward. And I think with the approach of, I want to know what has been done to address, what is being done moving forward to accomplish addressing the deficiencies noted. I know some things in audits, I've, heard them years and years over my time at the city, that there's always going to be something that's going to be a finding because of the way the organization is structured. We can't have oversight over, staff oversight over every little condition. But when we have a deficiency that's recurring and kind of trending, that we do need to address it. I just want to know what has been put in place at this point and where we're going with it forward. So,
Commissioner Ward, then Commissioner Jacob.
Well, we did get a memo from Ms. Holte that one of the major concerns is the amount of staffing, and we've had retirements and staffing changes. And so it is they're desperately trying to hire people to fill a void, and it just isn't it just isn't happening. We're not in a easy hiring situation. So I think that has been addressed. I've been part of a number of these audits over the years, and my procedure when I talk to accountants and state auditors, and we just had an audit for the Emergency Communications Board in Rochester last time. And I always ask the guy or gal presenting, do you see any red flags? And the ones I've sat in, they say, no. I mean, they're qualified, they're pointing out things, but we always have, if you look at the report, there is an action plan. And the action plan is there. They're always being addressed through administration and finance and department heads. They do come up with action plans. So we're trying to fulfill this most recent one. We're trying to fulfill the action plan by hiring some people, reorganizing a little bit due to the federal dollars, which we have to be accountable for. Absolutely. So I don't see it as problematic. We're working on it. I do think a formal review can be fine. You do have to agree we came through 2 years of COVID, and it was not easy to work with state auditors in a COVID situation. Most of those were Zoom meetings. And there is and I don't know, we should analyze, there is an expense to have the state auditors come to do a formal presentation. So maybe the review is, with our own staff to avoid that expense. I don't know what it is, but I know there is an expense to it. So looking forward, figuring out what process we would use is more than in line.
Okay, Commissioner Jacob.
Yeah, so in my 10 years on the board, of course, Whitewater Joint Powers Board, we have these audits annually. I review them. I don't ask for special staff time to be spent helping me interpret the audit. I feel like that's my job. This is a little strange to go back to this audit from so long ago that we've all had access to for this amount of time. If there was questions with this, I'm surprised that Commissioner Meyer, that you're just getting to that this many months after the audit. I don't need to have a special session to have someone kind of babysit me through what I feel my job is. So, I used to be a dairy farmer. Now I'm a crop farmer, but every time you have a dairy inspection, the inspector never leaves without pointing out something. Well, that door wasn't shut, or flies could have got in there. They're gonna always they're gonna put something down. So I didn't see any major red flags with the last audit, and I certainly had the ability to ask anyone within the administration or staff that I felt to answer any questions that I felt needed to be asked. So I feel like we're kind of burdening staff with our job. I feel very, very competent and qualified to do this without.
Commissioner Olson.
I would agree with you almost 100%, except that when you say you are comfortable, if we want to be transparent, we do have something that's trending and moving forward. Administrator Holte has sent us an email explaining it to us, but I don't know if the people out there have seen that email. If we want to be transparent, let's just let the public know what we're doing with that deficiency, how we're addressing it, what our difficulties have been as an organization, and how we're going to monitor fixing that in the future. I think that's pretty simple. It's moving forward. It's moving positively forward, and it's giving the public some answers that we already know. I don't look at this as a bad thing to have. Basically,
they should have that information anyhow.
Well, they could, but if we talk about it here, then it is public more, so. I think Administrator Holte has kind of answered us in emails in the last week or so that we could just talk about here, and I don't think it's going to take any more staff time. But that's just my feeling. I would support it going forward, just to have a brief presentation on them, not talking the auditor coming, talk about what's trending and how we're going to address it, because we do have to hold staff accountable for addressing it.
Commissioner Ward.
Well, I think we just had the discussion and we've indicated that we have a action plan. And I think the action plan, I didn't copy it, but I think the action plan indicated more staff was going to be hired. So, and the audit is on our website. So it is transparent, it is very transparent. Anybody can read it and gather the same information. I do agree that we need to hold staff accountable, and it is a trend, but I think we've discussed it tonight now. People know that we've got an action plan. We're working on hiring people to help in that staffing area. And in the future, if you want to, once we get the state audit, we all get the copy, we all can review it. And if we feel we want to, and if there's more ongoing issues, we should have the discussion. Don't have a problem with that. But I think I think the public knows now that it's there. They can read it. They can see the action plan. We've discussed the hiring process to be corrective action plan if we can get people hired.
Commissioner Meyer.
So this is our second meeting, not the actual discussion.
Yeah, that's true. See, we didn't have the little stars there to figure it out.
And in my trying to really understand this, I was doing some additional research with a body that was created by Congress to help with public audits. And the question I was trying to figure out is, how can you have a clean audit? Because we did. And so there's a statement about the financial statements. There's a statement about the internal controls of financial reporting. And then there's a statement about internal controls over compliance. And it's the third one. And so they sort of go through this long explanation of what do each of those mean. And so for me, it is a more complicated topic than it perhaps seems on the surface, which is why I think it's important for us to understand. And in particular, since we have had this a number of years in a row. So I still think it would be good for us to have a conversation.
Commissioner
I
Olson.
had a conversation of sorts with Mr. Fritz, and I told him kind of where I was leaning towards this, that he supported what I was saying, so that, so on his advice, I'd like to see it go forward too.
We have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we bring it to another meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second by Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Meyer to bring it to a third meeting for full discussion.
Yeah, this is the second meeting. Yeah.
Is there any other discussion on the
I'll hold my
motion?
questions for the third meeting.
I am in favor of having additional discussion. I think it's always important to talk about the significance and the timeliness of these deficiencies. We have the action plan, but this has been going on, and I think we need to address it more in public. And so that's where I'm coming in on the motion. Is there any further discussion?
Well,
Commissioner Jacob.
Well, just with your comment right there about the timeliness of this audit has been out for how many months? 10 months. So I'm just wondering why now and why not, Commissioner Meyer, this was you who brought this up. Why didn't you, when this audit came out, why didn't you have these questions then? And
I have a clarification. My remarks when I'm talking about the timeliness, I'm talking about the timeliness of the deficiencies. These have been ongoing. I believe Commissioner Olson was talking about trending. That's what I was referring to. The timeliness of the audit, it's always there. If we have questions, I think they can come up. Commissioner Meyer.
You're absolutely right. And it is, it is sitting in the meeting with the auditors from the state in the kickoff meeting in March, when they said, oh, you have material deficiencies in your last audit. And I was surprised, because that is my history working in corporate, work in a corporation. It was like, oh, that's kind of a big deal.
So you didn't look at it, is what you're saying?
No,
Oh,
but now that I have looked
you
at
want
it,
someone to spoon feed it to you?
now that I have looked at it, and now that I see that in fact,
Let's have decorum at our meeting, please.
when you look backwards, that there were times when this was just a significant deficiency, but this year it's risen to the level of being a material weakness, which is of a higher level. So, and just really the research that I did in terms of trying to understand the difference between the different parts of the audit that appear there. In general, having an audit that doesn't show any issues with the financial statement really shows that you have accepted accounting practices. But then there's a section to do with internal controls, and those really have to do with your implementation of the process. In my mind, it's a little, it took me a while to sort of sort it out, and talking to individuals that have a lot more experience with this as in their living, but as they make their living. But it's kind of like having a driver's license shows that I know what the law is. But if I got caught in a speeding camera, a ticket, I was caught speeding by a traffic camera, it would show that even though I know what the rules are, there are times when I don't really follow the rules. And I see that the internal controls are a little bit more like that. We know what the rules are, but we don't always follow them. And this is a situation that has been going on and now has risen to a higher level. So I think that what we're hearing is that potentially it isn't just a matter of throwing more people at it, but that structuring it in the right way so that it's a priority, that we meet the requirements of the federal programs and the documentation. So.
Commissioner Ward.
So I have a question for Commissioner Meyer, the kickoff meeting. Do you remember who the auditors from the state were? Because the reason I ask is because, again, I've sat through a number of them, and there's two auditors that have done this for a couple of years. And I'm just wondering if somebody changed. Sometimes when you change staff, they pick up on different things. And like I said, when I always asked the previous, where's the red flag? Where do you see the red flags? And they really didn't have any red flags. So I'm just questioning if we had a change in from the state auditor's office. And then with, you're saying we have deficiencies, and so the public knows this is small samplings of the human service program, which we get federal
This
funds.
conversation should be held for the next.
Well,
You're
setting a stage for the public. They're thinking, what in the world is Winona County doing? But it's a very small sampling of human service functions that we get reimbursed from and this is the way I understand, we get reimbursed from the federal government. There's a lot of reporting and things. So you are suggesting we need to hold our employees accountable because they haven't been doing the right job. There is a process. There's forms, there's regulations, there's processes and procedures. And we're saying our employees haven't been doing that. If it comes up in this audit because we're not getting the funds that we should.
We're in the weeds. The motion
Well-
is that we would have a full discussion at a future board meeting on the item of audits and how we should proceed. Whether we want to have ongoing review with the board, if we want to continue to operate the way we are, and to have a discussion on some of the deficiencies.
I would just like to add, my goal is looking forward, what is the plan that is in place and how is it going to be implemented? That's my goal. And
Yeah, it's a simple motion.
Yeah.
So are we ready to vote on the motion? Okay, I don't see any further discussion. All those in favor of the motion to proceed and have a future discussion on the issue of audits and our review of them, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Hey.
Okay, the motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Kavesi. Item 6.7 is to approve or deny a future agenda item to discuss the commission fee for bank levy.
I brought this forward,
Is it 2-star? We're just going to move it on?
2-star.
Okay.
but I brought it forward, for the, I was contacted by a constituent who, I think Maureen has explained it to us, through an estate process. And they were the executor or named something, and there's more than, I mean, there's several children, and it was a kind of confusing matter that the sheriff's office got involved in. I believe Karen's office got involved in through the courts. And our fee schedule of 6% took a sizable chunk out of the settlement. And he just asked that I bring it forward for discussion, feeling that that fee that that the state was charged was not commensurate with the services that were provided, and maybe it could be a lesser amount that was more reasonable. So I told him I would bring it forward for his family. I've known his family for years.
All right, was that a motion?
Well, I guess I'll make a motion that I could get 3 votes to bring it to another meeting that we can maybe, and maybe at that point, we could have some solutions, potential solutions presented.
I would second it. Not hearing any discussion. It seems like we could have a maximum fee that wouldn't be, because this was a lot. I don't remember the exact number now, if it was 5 or 6 figures, but it was a lot. So
19,000 some dollars. Right? Yeah.
I would support the motion. I think it's always good. This gives us a chance to explain some of the fee schedule issues and a chance for us to see what those fee schedule issues mean to the people. This particular man, has difficulty with this fee schedule, and we need to look at that and consider it. So I would support the motion to have a full discussion at a future meeting.
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, a future meeting, because we do approve the fees every year. And this is the first time it's ever been an issue. So yeah, we should look at it.
I don't have any concerns with, I'll be interested to hear what Commissioner Olson has to bring forward on it.
Okay, so Commissioner Olson has moved and I have, Commissioner Meyer has seconded approval of a future agenda item to discuss the commission fee for bank levy. Is there any further discussion?
Since you mentioned that the sheriff's department and my office may have been involved in this case, I'm not aware of, because we get involved in a lot of different cases.
It was serving.
You don't have to say it now.
Okay.
I just, for discussion purposes, when you do have the 3-star meeting, that we can, that both
Get the
Sheriff
facts.
Gannard and myself are made aware of it, and we can be prepared to discuss what might have caused, a
Maureen
5 or
has
6-figure thing.
addressed
So,
that so,
yeah,
already.
certainly not money that our office would get. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving as a future agenda item to discuss the commission fee for bank levy signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Commissioner Ward, I believe you had an announcement for us.
Announcement. We have upcoming the 164th Winona County Fair, July 6th through the 10th at St. Charles. It can be a free fair. You can park on the street and walk in. If you want to park, you will pay. I do have brochures and I know they do have a website. There is events Wednesday through Sunday. And so be there. It's a great event. You see livestock, you see arts, crafts. I'm sure there'll be political vendors and people selling all kinds of things, and you can eat fair food and enjoy the 4-H exhibits, and it's a great opportunity. So come.
Best onion rings I've ever had.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Kavesi?
Yeah, the Jail Design and Construction Committee met this morning, so kind of fresh off the press. Here's an update. There's going to be a crane in the next few weeks that's going to be actually lifting up the prefabricated cells over the current walls. So for anybody who likes to construction watch, we're coming into peak season, so stay tuned for that. We are about 45% complete on the project on schedule. Apparently there's been some comments that right now the building is dark. There's a kind of a seal on it, and that is only a seal. The building will not be black when it's completed. So if any constituents have comments about that. They did talk about the veneer that's going to go on over the dark. And apparently it blends quite well with the the new Fastenal building, the county office building, and even the courthouse. So the odd man out is the original law enforcement center is much darker than this building, but 3 out of 4 is good. The next meeting is the 26th of July at 9 o'clock. At any time, they advise that tours can be scheduled. Contact Steve Buswell. I contacted him and I'm waiting on a return phone call. I would like to tour it. If any other commissioners want to tour it, we get issued hard hats and whatever. This is a very preliminary tour because right now there's not a lot of detail, but it's a good chance to have a tour and then come later when wiring is being added and some of the other interior choices, then you can actually see the real progress. So we can schedule a tour. I guess we would have to work through Maureen, depending on how many commissioners and how Mr. Buswell wants to handle it, Captain Buswell, because of the open meeting law. And coming soon, this is another alert, there will be a 2-week shutdown on 4th Street. They didn't have a date. They're working with MnDOT and the city and Excel because it deals with putting in the electrical aspects. So there will be a detour around around 4th Street, which may affect some parking and some access. So stay tuned for more information on that. So if there's any questions, I can take them or.
That concludes our business.
I did tour the jail after the last meeting, so. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Olson has moved, Kubesi has seconded, adjournment of the meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.